All right, welcome everyone. My name is Neha Gupta. I'm the founder of College Shortcuts. I'm so glad for everyone that's here. I had the honor of meeting Peter Jackson, who ended up hearing me at EO Chicago doing an event about college admissions and planning ahead. And Peter and I met up for breakfast one day, and I just had to have him on the show. So, Peter, welcome. It's so great to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. So before we get started, what I'd love to do is just maybe explain a little bit about who you are. If you we can first start off with, where you went to school, high school wise, and then college and what you do today, just as a short intro, that would be awesome.
I'm a Chicago native. Spent my whole life in the city, for better or for worse. High school, went to private school at a school called Latin School of Chicago. After that, went to also another maybe well-known, maybe not so well-known institution called the University of Chicago, where I majored in economics, which math majors there called Math for Dummies. So definitely had some very challenging studies in my college life, and then spent time in did sort of the Wall Street thing right after college. Had a summer internship at Goldman Sachs. Realized I wasn't really culturally cut out for Wall Street, which is its own tangent. And then, spent time in basically small businesses for the rest of my 20s. And eventually going to business school part-time at Kellogg, Northwestern, and probably the most transformational work experience I had. Early employee at Groupon, saw it grow from a company of 30 to a company of 10,000 in 3 years. And then sort of after that decided, oh, I've got to figure out how I can, sort of own my own business. At Groupon, and we talked to a lot of small business owners every day, about advertising strategy. But I think that definitely seeped into my sort of energy, and now I'm a small business owner myself. I acquired a small industrial supply distribution business called Miller Industrial about 7 years ago now. And so that's still living in Chicago.
Yeah.
So live in the city, work in the suburbs. So yeah,
Oh my
that's
gosh,
us.
it's so interesting that we have such similar backgrounds. I also went to a private school in Houston, Texas. Um, Went to Rice, did my econ major, got also an internship at Goldman Sachs, and also realized I really didn't want to do that. It was the path, though, that was like really well regarded at that time, and I think it still is. Like,
Still is very much so.
iBanking, private wealth management, like and to be at Goldman was like such a big deal.
100%.
you know, and and then in the end, I had a mentor there say, "Hey, you could always come back here, but you're built for more than just this." And I was really lucky to have kind of a mentor on my pathway to tell me that. So definitely interesting how we have a lot of synergies. And so today, what I really want to talk about and touch on for everyone that's listening is about, private school experiences. What is that like? What are some of the things you encounter to also talking about just in general about resilience, entitlement that can happen, and overall personal development when it comes to this process of college admissions, but even beyond. Um, so I know one of the things we had talked about heavily when we met was a lot about just development as a human. And I think one of the things I noticed, at least at private school, and I have families ask me all the time, should we send our kid to private or public? What are the outcomes for college? And so I'll speak to it from a college admissions space, but then I also want to talk about it with you about kind of our experiences of, being in private school. So from the college admission space, I think that like where you go to high school does matter. And in the sense of if those schools tend to feed, and if you're looking to go into top 20s, if they tend to feed to top 20s, then most likely there's a higher chance of a student going into a top 20 from those schools, especially if they have those relationships with a college counselor. They know the academic rigor is similar. And in reality, it just feels like those are schools that have those types of relationships. Of course, you have to be in the top percentage of those schools. You can't be at the bottom. But, I want to ask you, Peter, to maybe share a little bit about your private school experience and when you went and kind of how that felt for you.
Sure. So, well, one, m my parents sent me to, I was a scholarship kid, and my parents sent me to private school because they thought the education I'd receive would be superior than Chicago public schools. They were 100% right about that. And Chicago CPS has gotten better. There's like more selective schools now in the CPS system. But we're going back now, I don't know, 20 plus years. More than that, but I don't know that I can't remember the exact number now at this
Totally,
point.
no problem.
So they were absolutely right about the education being superior in the private school system in Chicago back then. And one of the things that I sort of had to learn my own secondary education, quite frankly, related to it wasn't just about academics. I was actually academically pretty solid in terms of I could hold my own. More of it was just the experiences of being around, you know, wealthy, affluent family or concentrated affluence, many wealthy families in this environment, and just understanding, oh, okay, many of the kids that I'm around grew up very differently than I did, and oh, that takes some getting used to. That takes some understanding. That takes some, and I was fortunate that I was intellectually very curious. So for me, it was like, oh, there's an opportunity to learn more about kids that grew up very differently than I did. One of the one of the great examples I love to give is, all right, so Chicago is very, hot summers and, summer, 3 months, some of the greatest weather in Chicago, some of the greatest times to move out. And that's when I'm accustomed to people being tan. It's like 3 months out of the year, right? So, in sort of, private schools, there are a handful of kids that are tan year round. And you go, white kids, right? So you go, all right, well, I know you don't have this beautiful, chocolate glow. So how does that work when Chicago's only 3 months of good weather, right? So it's, you sort of get used to lifestyles where it's like, oh, you're on vacation where there's sunny weather year round. Makes sense, right? And so those types of details are things that I didn't grow up locally in my family sort of understanding, but learned, in this environment, details like that of just like, oh yeah, that's different. That's different than how you grew up. That's different. And so with that, sort of the exposure was, oh, okay, there's a lot of opportunities that are well beyond sort of what I grew up with locally in my family. And the truth is, I wouldn't even think I have the capability to, you know, go to University of Chicago or I mean, basically get smoked there in economics. I was like, that was just a whole nother level of academics. But, pursue sort of an entrepreneurial journey, or even sort of, be a business owner today if it wasn't for some of those formative experiences I got in private school.
Yeah. And I think, in terms of like, I know in my experience, which again, yes, it was more than 20 years ago. But at that time, the world was very different. And, I was also intellectually curious. And I think that one of the things that I learned early on was, in a way, how to be a chameleon. Because, in my house, there were certain things that were normal. But, when you go to school and you're around people that don't look like you, don't eat the type of food you do, that's smelly. I mean, Indian food was not considered cool in 20 years ago,
Sure,
right? Like people were
sure,
like, ew, let's close your lunch.
sure.
Right. So there was a lot of like cultural difficulty, I would say, from my experience growing up in Texas, going to a Baptist middle school or Episcopal high school, where, you just had to learn quickly about, how to adapt and how to fit into circles that really weren't actually made for you. Um, and I will say that I do think that, like, from a experience, like, we tried to put me in public school. I just experienced a lot of bullying at a young age.
Hmm.
My parents switched me into private thinking like things would be better. I think that, one of the things you were sharing about was like the opportunities and how, like, yes, you do have to learn a lot, but at the same time, like, there are opportunities completely available. I think the other thing for me that was huge was being around a level of affluence that I had never seen before in my life. Um, and I kind of want to talk to that because now we have kind of data, right? Like as adults 20 years later of what that experience was like, and then what are maybe some of our peers like now today, and how affluence, and I think this is a big thing that, a lot of families are like, oh, I want my kid to have a good job. I want them to make lots of money, and then they'll be happy. And
Yeah.
I want to touch on, just the concept of, you know, entitlement in the sense that was that something you saw as well at your private school, just a level of entitlement where just, they weren't, maybe they weren't that driven, they weren't sure what they wanted to do, and it didn't really matter if they did or not.
So, all right. So I'm going to do a roundabout way of just getting into some of that stuff. I think, um, America's culture is very individualistic and money driven.
Yes.
Uh, and so those are like strong American values. All right. So when you're in an environment where it seems like everybody's sort of gone to the mountaintop in terms of like lots of money's in play, right? Um, there are challenges with that because the assumption is that there's no problems. Right. There's like, oh,
Right.
you're in an environment, with concentrated affluence, everybody's one, so to speak. Yeah, no problems, right?
Right.
And
Everything's great.
everything's great. And
Yeah.
there's also this kind of energy around, well, everything should be great because you've already done the thing that supposedly is the most valuable thing in America, which is having the most money.
Hmm.
So how you can provide for your family or your child,
Yeah.
offspring of it with a family, you're well taken care of. You can't have any problems. You can go buy anything you want anytime. How can you have, that's not a problem, right? So
Right.
it definitely creates this distortion of everybody's got problems. I don't care where you grew up or what's going on. I mean, like this is the law of the universe. Universe says, hey, you want to be happy, work through your problems. Like,
Mm.
and that is the universal law. And so I think there's this tendency to smooth that out as a shortcut to happiness, like smooth out the problems as a shortcut to happiness, even though it literally does the opposite long term. And so, so that's a backdrop from my perspective. Now, to get more specific around, are there entitled kids in these environments? Of course there are. I will also say that it is a challenge to raise kids when you have financial resources. That's a problem that if you don't have financial resources, you think that's not a big deal. But that is its own unique challenge inside of environments like this. And so the way I look at it is a mistake that I see a good enough amount of parents make because of the tendency you want the best for your kids. You want to, you know, protect and provide. You want them to have, a great future. And there's a balance. There's almost like this range of managing um, their experience in the sense that you could smooth that path and it's like everything's easy. Well, the
Yes.
irony to that is nature at some point is going to throw them a curveball. There's no parent that can keep their kids from having a
Mhm.
curveball, right?
Totally.
And so if you it's almost like if you haven't been doing any training and you need strength, you will be weak and therefore you won't be able to deal with what thing required strength. And um and so I think that's definitely a challenge. And that's maybe where some of this entitlement shows up. It's like life's so easy, I just expect it to be easy. And so, people use this entitlement word, which is of course judgy and negative, but that's kind of how I see, sort of some of that come into play. But I think the larger issue is it is challenging to, I mean, I guess for lack of a better, it is challenging to raise rich kids, particularly if
Agreed.
you, in your generation, you were the striver, the one who, you know, provided
Right.
this,
You're
environment.
the one that has the hunger.
Yeah, exactly. If you didn't grow up as a rich kid and now your offspring are rich kids, like challenge. That is
It
a
is.
problem. That is not something that our society values as like a thing. Our society just says, oh, you made your money? Awesome. Like life is great. You got no problems.
Right.
You don't have
Or
problems. Your
or
kids don't have problems.
or they say don't complain.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Right.
what are
It's
you complaining about? Like, there's people that, you know,
100%.
have
100%.
XYZ problem. Like, oh, your kid is on social media all the time and oh, they're spoiled. Like, who cares? There's a lot of that. But I think when you're in the circle of it, like I see a lot of families that are like, I can't get my kid off the phone. I
Sure.
can't even tell you the amount of um, the budget that doesn't exist that is basically all Uber food.
Sure. Sure.
That's a big one I hear a lot with high school to college kids where they have no
Sure.
sense of the value of money and
Sure.
they're charging like 1,500, 2,000 a month in Uber
Sure.
food, which by
Sure.
the way is very easy to do since it is expensive. Um,
Sure.
but they're not going to take the time to learn how to cook or, value that. Um, I do think, from what I've seen at least, is that sometimes what happens is parents end up trying to give their kids everything and then they end up with what people are now talking about like soft kids or
Yeah,
people
100%.
soft. And I remember early on, like I had met someone in their 40s, and I remember they had said, like, I had a broken engagement and I just can't recover from this. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, I've never had the rug ripped out from under me. I've never been through something really hard. And I am literally stuck. I have enough money that I don't really need to work with my family. So like I just don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That in itself is its own problem. I was watching a video, I remember this was like a month or two ago, and I don't know if you've seen this video, but it's Will Smith talking about how most people talk about their rock bottom being hard. And he goes, what's also very hard is when you're at the highest point in your career, the highest point in everything, and then you're like, so what?
Yeah.
That's a scary feeling.
Yeah.
And
And
no one talks about it.
yeah, it's, I mean, and they're just similar to mental health in this society where there's a stigma. There's a similar stigma of, being very wealthy or being very achievement oriented, successful and sort of lacking, feeling off, lacking purpose. Like all that stuff is just, again, associated with everything's got problems associated with it. There's nothing you're going to choose that doesn't, even if you choose to say, okay, great, I've got all the money I've wanted, or I've got achieved all the things I wanted to achieve. There are problems associated with both of those, right? And so, you know, I think it's honest and real to say, yeah, problems everywhere. I'm really influenced by Mark Manson's book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F,
Mhm.
where the kind of the net takeaway from that book is everything's got problems no matter what you choose, and the happiest people know this and thus choose their own problems. They have agency over the problems they've chosen versus the most unhappy people have no control over the problems they've chosen or that are in their lives. Right. So the way I see it, I remind myself, yeah, running a small business is hard. You're constantly resource constrained. Like,
Yeah,
you know, I can't recruit like Goldman Sachs can. Right.
totally.
So
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, Peter, I someone recently shared with me like I forgot what it's like. Someone was like, "Yeah, when I am done with work at my job, I close my laptop, I come home,
sure.
um, and no one is allowed to send me a message." I was like, "Till when?" They're like, "Till Monday when I walk back in."
Yeah.
I said, so you literally don't check your email or messages or think about work. Like there's no existing mental load about anything work related. And they were like, no. And I was like, what am I doing to my brain as an entrepreneur? That I am dreaming about it. I'm thinking about it in the shower. I'm
Sure.
constantly, and look, I know I could probably have better boundaries around my work. I know that. There are times in my life I have better work-life balance. And then there are times when I'm just like on, and when I'm on, I'm just on, and it is what it is.
Sure.
For me, I have to like ride that wave because
Sure.
sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not.
Sure.
But I think this is the kind of thing where, like, when we're raising kids and we're talking about parenting kids, it's about like thinking about what type of kid do you want? I think entrepreneurship is a very interesting pathway. I don't think it's for everybody at all. Even when I work with students, I can tell the ones that are probably built for entrepreneurship in terms of that like nature aspect and personality. And then I think there's some that, you know what, maybe they need to go to college or maybe they need later and some other experiences, and then that turns on for them. Um, but I agree with you. I think that like students are all raised in different ways. And I think the one question I get a lot is how do I raise a child, let's say in an environment that is very entitled, right? Like I went to private school and I remember I went to private school with a billionaire's child. I went to school also with the Enron kids. Like I was at
Sure.
that new money kind of school
Sure.
in Houston. Everyone had a BMW, everyone had an
Sure.
Audi, Escalade, some people were dropped off in limos, etc. So I think the thing that I remember was, this one time I was invited senior year, because I wasn't cool until then, I guess. Senior year, I was invited to this party where somebody owned the entire cul-de-sac of the most expensive neighborhood in Houston. Like the whole house with like seven Escalades that were black in the front. I was like, that's odd. Who buys? Why? I even asked, I said, why do you have seven of the same car in the driveway? And he goes, oh, that's for all of our staff. And I'm like, I didn't ask another question because I was like, oh, clearly I'm missing something. And then I come in and he goes, hey, you're Indian. And so I asked one of my nannies to get you a Fanta because you're Indian from the Indian store, like assuming I don't drink Coke.
Sure.
I was like, okay. And it was kind, sure. I was like, okay, thanks.
Sure.
And there were Degas paintings. Like I was an
Sure.
art history student and I was like, is that a Degas painting? And he goes, yes. I was like, that does not look like a print,
Yeah.
but I didn't say anything, right? Like it's that intellectual curiosity and realizing you're in a space that you may not understand fully. But I remember I came home and we lived in a nice house, to be clear. But I remember I came home and I asked my mom if we were poor.
Yeah.
I remember she literally took her hand, and I'm almost 17, and then she took a minute. She goes, "Why do you think that?" And I was like, "Well, I just went to this house that was this," and then she realized like I'm not trying to insult her in any way.
Yeah.
It was just the first time I had ever experienced this, and she goes, "Just want to let you know you're not poor. There's different people in the world that have different levels of money." And she tried to explain like where she came from in like a village with dirt roads in India
Yeah.
and with
Yeah.
like barely slippers and shoes
Yeah.
and no internet and no like it was like barely electric. The way she described it, I was like, well, that sounds really rough.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things where I never understood that that was real. Now that I've gotten older, I see it everywhere and all the time. But the big thing that I notice that's the issue of it is that yes, you can have all that money, but when people don't have purpose or haven't found some form of passion, I have seen also a link of people needing more support from a mental health perspective, anti-anxiety medications, depression medications, like unable to figure out who and why they're here. And so I want to talk about like why it matters, regardless of how much you make, and why I'm so passionate personally about helping students find out what their personality is, what are the type of things they may be interested in, passion. From your perspective, and we texted a little bit after our visit about how I was like, man, like no purpose is not attractive.
Sure.
Um,
Dangerous, actually.
I definitely think it's dangerous. I think one of the things that I think I texted you was, if a man is in his mid 40s and is still single and is still not figured out his purpose, it's actually kind of dangerous. Like
This isn't a dating show.
it's not a dating show, even though I do want to eventually create my network for all of our students to meet amazing other people at some point because we have such an insane network with our students. But it's not a dating show. But I will say that, like, I do think when it comes to job interviews or dates or meeting people, like when like saying, "Oh, I just, don't know what I'm doing still," isn't really usually attractive. And I
Yep.
think there is a silent thing going on, especially in the Indian community, where there are 30-year-olds still living on their parents' couch
Hmm.
because the parents gave them everything. And then
Hmm.
now they're kind of dealing with the repercussions of that in the process. And so, from your perspective, how do you think, other than obviously not trying to traumatize a child, right? Like that's not the goal either. But like, how do you think that parents can build resilience in a world of if they are surrounded by the Instagrammy life, the private school experience, or high net worth families all around you? How do you think they're able to build grit as a muscle and resilience in their kids?
All right. So I got a couple thoughts on this. All right. So I would just write down my notes. So the first thing I think about is just this recognition that we're all one in a trillion, in the sense that the likelihood in the universe that there's one human is just so impossible. Like, space is dark and cold. We can't live in space without adaptations. Okay. And that's infinite. So somehow on this like planet Earth, like we've got billions. Okay. Even though that's like, you know, th just a drop in the bucket in the universe. All right. So we're all this like randomness of like, none of us should exist, but billions of us do. So each of us is special in that way. Okay, if that's what the science says. We just do probabilities. The probabilities say like none of this should exist, but it does. Okay. By definition, that's special. All right. And then from that perspective, I think if you say, all right, well, I'm one in a trillion, then purpose does matter because it's like it can't be wasted. It's like it's so rare that it's got to be special. Okay, great. Like, how do I find what my fingerprint is going to be on this opportunity? Right. And so obviously, you and I sit in a very wealthy part of America where we can even afford to have this conversation at 11 in the morning. Right. So
Sure.
I recognize that.
Yes.
Uh, and so, even more so, and I don't mind the added pressure that, have very fortunate circumstances, do something great. There's
Yes.
pressure to that, but so what? That's great.
Agreed.
Uh, and uh, that's where I think if more the focus is understanding, okay, it's a journey. What kind of practice does it take to find, your purpose, your fingerprint, your stamp, your there's a really good model that I like. I think that the Japanese call it ikigai,
Mm.
where, it's what are you good at, kind of what does the market want or willing to pay you for, and what sort of gives you energy, gives you a life force. Like that's just a really hard thing to triangulate, and it should be. Uh, the sort of the great things nature sort of says you got to work for it. There's a cost to it. And so there's definitely a sort of focused energy cost to find this purpose thing. It doesn't just voila,
Yeah, it doesn't just fall on you.
right? And so the and there's two challenges to this, both from a parental perspective and a society perspective, which are, interwoven. But yes, I mean, parents of means tend to say, okay, well, hard stuff is like, ugh, I don't know, it just feels bad. Like, so I'm going to smooth it out so you don't do hard stuff. Well, when you smooth it out too much, you also don't do the good, hard stuff that allows you to find purpose. That's one of the risks, right? And you see it all the time. The other challenge is America being America. We sort of have this buyer beware society, right? And by that I mean if you don't really have enough of your sense of self, somebody else is happy to take it and keep it and hold on to it. So you never find it. And by that I mean, okay, if you're not sort of, I think the universal thing is You got to work through your own pain patch. Nature has a custom tailored pain patch for each one in a trillion of us. And you've got to
Yes.
work through it to find your own happiness. And you can't inherit somebody else's pain patch. It doesn't work that way. You can't say, well, Johnny's pain patch, I do that for breakfast every day. Like, it doesn't work like that. Right? Well, nature
Right.
custom tailored for Johnny. You've got yours, even if it's hard, it doesn't matter. And, since we live in this buyer beware society, I think, and by that I mean, if you're not willing to work through that pain patch, there are other people who want to take your attention, money, etc. So, you know, the best, the goat of all this, I think, is Mark Zuckerberg, actually, right? I find it very ironic that this guy's focused like a laser, and every hour of focus he has on his own creation distracts billions of other people. Really, if you really connect the dots, it's like so his ability to focus very well becomes other people's distraction. And attention's worth a lot. So if you can somehow channel your own attention on finding your own sense, that's worth a lot. That's really a high quality life. But nature
Agreed.
says we're not going to give it to you easy. And America says, oh, by the way, if you're not willing to do that, Zuck wants all of your attention. Awesome. And if you don't want to give it to Zuck, Zuck's got some competition. Big Pharma would love. Oh, you're feeling bad? Big Pharma would love to take your brain for short-term hits. That's the legal stuff. Big Pharma's got some competition. It's called the Sinaloa cartel. The illegal stuff. Yeah, sure. Like,
Mm.
you like
Yeah.
so basically, uh those entities and more say, well, if you're not into this whole thing of it's hard to find your fingerprint in this universe, don't worry about that. Just take all these short-term hits and, you know, pay us. We'll take you
Right.
away from this short-term pain,
Yes,
right?
because it is pain.
Right? And so that's the dual kind of challenge. It's like our society just allows for these massive entities to
Distract.
exist. Yeah, distract, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
like that's and quite frankly, I mean, as maybe in certain ways immoral as that might seem, it's also wealth creating depending on what side of that you're on,
Right. Right.
right? Like if,
Sure.
you know, so and like that's so there's a lot of duality with this stuff. I think there is a lot of duality in general with this value of saying, oh, okay, I want to be super wealthy. Cool. Remember, there's a cost for that. Like there's no free lunch in nature. It all takes energy,
Agreed.
right? So
Yes.
it's like, and I think one of the things of just, this is how my parents raised me, so it's coming from them, Doris and Bernard, holler, um, is if you want to achieve anything, there's going to be a cost associated with it. If you don't want to pay the cost, you can't cheat it. You'll get taken advantage of if you even try. It's like just recognize this is the cost. If you're willing to pay it, you will eventually get it. And that's a level of reality that I think definitely creates resilience, allows you to sort of stay more focused in a world that is shifting around you, right? And I think that's the future anyway. I mean, we're constantly going to be in this world that's constantly shifting, lots of distractions, lots of people doing lots of different things, where it's like, oh, okay, just keep your head on straight. That takes work. There's a certain amount of, you know, I call it good pain. It's like working out. It's like,
Yes.
yeah, it's like there will be resistance. It's good pain. It'll make you stronger. Um, and so I think that ability for kids growing up in this society to understand the costs of things is huge. Understand how to work to get to provide the cost of certain things is huge. Understand that, oh, by the way, others are trying to actually make sure you don't, as odd as it sounds, like that you don't figure out your own stuff.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you think about, like, if you look at technically the public school education model, it was to create employees,
Sure.
right? Like it was an assembly line system. And then you've got, a few people in the well, many people in the education space trying to either break that model or build, like in my case, for example, I was going back through my Google Drive and I found these old brochures I made 10 years ago called Peak Performance Student, and I could not get anyone to buy that service at that time.
Hmm.
No one believed that it was important to understand your kid's personality, do some career
Hmm.
counseling, build some projects together. I mean, I'm telling you, at
Sure.
least 12 years ago, I remember spending hours trying to explain to a parent why this might be helpful for their kid. Today, now they're like, oh, yeah, I've got an eighth, ninth grader. I've got to think about this now. You have internships with industry leaders. Yeah, we'll do those. You've got research papers. Yeah. You know how to have a coach to tell my kid, hey, these are some opportunities, like to build that curated, like you said, focused path, because human nature would be, I'd rather play Minecraft, Roblox, and Snapchat because those
Sure.
exist for billions of dollars to buy Robux and all these things, like you said, for companies and things to profit off you being 100% distracted,
Sure.
right? Like that's a phenomenal business as an entrepreneur to probably be in. Oh, I just distract,
Not even
make money.
probably. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, not
Um,
even probably. Yes.
right? But it does take a level of focus that we're not seeing with a lot of our kids today because they're given these distractions. I think the other big thing, and I think I texted you too about this, how I was encountering a family who had, two girls, one of which like failed out of 10th grade, another one failed out of ninth twice, was given the opportunity to go to private school, made a 7 in her history class. And, I obviously was like, oh, like, let the Indian auntie come in and put in those like boundaries. I could be that super, like, there was a show called The Nanny. I'm like, let me, the super tutor, like, come in. And it's funny, she actually agreed to it. We started the tutoring. And then like a weekend, they go, we just have so much summer vacation.
Yeah. Yep.
It just doesn't really work with our schedule. This is a lot of
Yeah.
work for them.
Yeah.
We'll get back to it in September.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not understanding. Like, you're frustrated about it. You're apparently losing sleep over it. But then you've got these kids and you don't really care to set in these boundaries and be like, actually, going to Greece is not for you.
Sure.
Right? Like
Sure.
anything below a 97, and I was like told, what are you doing? Right? Like, so I think we're growing up in a world where parents want to be their kid's best friend and not realizing the damage that's causing, right? Like now she's got two girls that are at a college that allows for online schooling because no school will take them. And now they're isolated at home and they're suffering mentally from it. And to me, that like kills me, right? Like I know the solution. I can provide that solution. I was like, I've got my tutor. You can hire me for the mental stuff and like get that peak performance mindset in. Like, let's just do it. And the thing is that I think at the helm of it is the parent.
Yeah. Well, for sure. I mean, and it's hard because there's an instinct to say, I want my kids to have it better than I did. And that's a good instinct. It's just, it's the universe to me is like so nuanced with this stuff. It's like, all right, to have for your kids to have it better than you did, they have to develop a better practice than you did. That's really the answer, right? And
When
and
you say practice, what do you mean by that?
yeah, so I think anything you want to achieve is going to be this focused energy over a long period of time, which is a practice, right? It's sort of like, yeah, it's a
But
skill, really.
Peter, I'm going to ask, most of the parents that had that focus to build that, when they have a kid, usually that kid has the opposite of that practice.
Well, and that's where I'm saying the nuance of you
Yeah,
want your kid to have it better than you did. And the nuance says it's not about what you can give them that's better than what you were given. It's about having them find their own practice that's better than how you found your own practice.
right.
And that's this like weird sort of like, whoa, big nuance there, right? Because you can blink and miss that. right? I want my kids to have it better than I did. So, well, the easy thing, well, yeah, I can provide these things. I can give them things, offer them
Yeah,
things,
I can buy
open
them whatever
doors,
they want, whenever they want, beautiful
right?
clothes. They get every extracurricular, they have everything available to them,
Sure,
but we're
right?
missing the values piece.
Yeah, exactly, right? And we're missing the piece that actually connects anybody to like their 1 in a trillion fingerprint, right? It's and it's well, some of that stuff is helpful. It's not, it's like some of it's necessary but not sufficient. Like that's like one of the weirdest situations to be in when something's like necessary or semi-necessary but far from sufficient. And in our society, people think money is necessary and sufficient, when at best it's necessary and not sufficient. So you have people who just, of course, have optimized on, hitting it out of the park in terms of, yeah, I've got all the money in the world. Well, still not sufficient. And that's because the nature of things is like no matter what you do, you have problems. No matter what you want to do, it has a cost. And that reality is where you can never insulate yourself from problems or costs. It doesn't exist. So the
Agreed. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that, I mean, from what I've seen, at least in my life experience of knowing people that have high levels of affluence, I also see the dark side of it. And I see people that like I'm actually gonna share my own experience. So I grew up in a house where like I'm the typical American dream story. My parents moved here. My dad said he moved here with $20 in his pocket. Like even just this weekend, my mom was talking about when like she was pregnant with my sister and how my dad lost his job. And they were at a furniture store and he just sat on the couch and he hadn't told my mom that I'm getting emotional. I don't know why, but he had told my mom that like he had lost his job and he just put his head down and started crying. Like I lost my
mm,
father when I was 18. So just picturing a man in his like 30s or 40s having to say that,
mm,
and my mom was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" Like she had never encountered a man crying, right? Like in her life. She's
mm,
like, "Hey, like it's okay. We'll figure it out. Like don't worry."
mm.
And from that pain and uncomfort, they started renting videos out of their garage. They were the first blockbuster for Indian movies
Yeah,
in their
incredible.
neighborhood. And my mom said, Neha, I just don't know how to explain this, but like when things are really tough, God steps in. And
Mm,
they ended up like getting their first store and they met some random person who was like, "Oh, I'm closing my store. Let me just take these shelves and give them to you
mm,
guys and set them up." And
mm,
my mom said that the day that they said that they had the first month rent free, my dad opened the store with like nothing in it. He was
mm,
like, "Oh, it's free? Yeah, we're
mm.
starting right now. Like, I have no money. We're starting right now." And they built that into a $40 million revenue business in electronics. They were the first to sell VCRs, they were the
Mm.
first to sell Nintendos. And guess who was never allowed a Nintendo in their house?
Yeah, of course.
They
Yeah,
were like, no.
yeah.
And so it's very interesting how I was brought up that way. My parents wanted to give me everything. They wanted me to fit in with everyone. So I had the Kate Spade tote that was
Sure.
big then. It was a stupid black purse. My mom never wanted me to feel like a greasy haired Indian kid in a way. She was always
Mm,
like, how do I make my kid look like them? She was
mm,
focused on assimilation. And then I think the big thing that happened for me was I got set off onto my own journey of complete and utter achievement. And it's why my TEDx is achievement killing us, because I do think that I did get to a point of I feel like I peaked early in life, like in the sense that like I became an entrepreneur, I did extremely well, and I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. I built this company. It was really amazing, right? College shortcuts. It's still obviously running. That's why I'm here. But there was a point in the business where I had like a full executive team that was like, hey, we don't need you anymore. Like we have our head of marketing, our head of finance, our head of
yeah,
operations. And that year, I was really lost. I started going to pottery classes. I didn't know what to do with myself. Like,
sure,
and it was like everyone was like, "Hey, you finally hit the dream of an entrepreneur. You need to
sure.
get up and enjoy this."
Yeah.
And that's a really scary feeling because on the outside, you're supposed to be like, yeah, I built this business. It doesn't need me. I'm making money. It's great. And then on the inside, you're like, I'm not needed anymore. Like, right? Like I became so entangled into wanting to feel needed. And
Mm,
my purpose was working with students. And so I think that we don't touch on that pinnacle experience. Like we push our kids to be highly achieving and all of that. And we don't realize that, like, yes, you can get them to the top, but if they are not experiencing some form of like, not, I don't want to say being needed, but like it really, I think it really does boil down to purpose. Like whatever that is, you can get lost very fast, whether it is seeing a therapist 5 times a week, whether it's, like lunching with other people that may not be the type of people you should be around anyways, right? Like it's very easy to fall off that track. Um, and it's interesting because, my mom to this day now is like, oh, I'll never retire. And I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, if I retire, I'll just die. So I feel like there's this balance between achievement and like fulfillment. I talk about it a lot in my TEDx, but like, and finding that kind of balance can be very hard, even in your 40s when you're evolving and changing. So you've got parents that want to ensure their kids are resilient and tough, but not traumatize them. We want them to have that practice, like you said. I'm raised by parents that built that practice into me. Um, and then we also want them to have, in a sense, like, I don't know if I want to say the word balance because I think balance is BS. I don't think it actually exists. I think anyone that talks about balance, maybe because I'm an entrepreneur, I feel that balance is BS. I don't know if you have thoughts about balance, but
I do.
what are your thoughts on it? Because
Well,
I just don't know.
so uh balance is just a charged word.
Yes.
People think equal amounts or whatever. I will say that it is a system of things that creates sort of this joyful life, right? And so in a system, it's not only one thing, right? And like, so sometimes people use that statement, it's not only one thing, as they use balance as the word to describe it. I would just say it's a portfolio. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Like,
So it's like,
yes.
right. So it's like, I don't like the word balance. I like the word portfolio better. Right. So,
I use the
um,
word chapters.
yeah, that too.
Yeah.
Right.
Like
And
I think our life has chapters, whether we like to admit it or not. And
sure.
there's certain chapters that are certain ways. Like I have chapters that it's amazing that I still reminisce about this one chapter at 30. And my sister is literally like, you're not that anymore. Like you talk about this one chapter. And to me, I'm reckoning with the fact that I am no longer the 30-year-old version that would love to travel all the time and be ever.
Sure.
Now I want my bed. I want my
Sure.
up. I'm becoming exactly what I told myself I wouldn't become, which is a creature of habit. So
Sure.
it's fascinating how we do continually change. But yeah, I do think balance is one of those things where you're right. It is a very charged word. Um, yeah, absolutely. I do think one thing I do want to touch on is I do think I was watching something recently talking about how team sports is definitely a way to help build a lot of these soft skills, such as resilience, teamwork, which a lot of people really don't think about. Sitting on the bench and supporting people, even though you may not be playing. I was a benched kid all the time. But I made the bench fun by bringing snacks and being well dressed and like cute and being a cheer for my team. But I found other ways to make that experience better instead of being like, wow, I'm a really bad soccer player. That's okay. Like it is what it is. Um, but I do think that there is a power to team sports. And I don't know, Peter, if you played sports.
Yeah. So I played basketball in high school, ran cross country, played volleyball a
Oh,
couple years, and also ran track a couple years. So
would you say that team sports is definitely a way that helped?
yeah, for sure. I mean, it's social. Sports are social in nature. So whoever you're on the team with, assuming the team's got decent dynamics, you hang out with those people more, you build, stronger bonds with them. And it's competitive, right? So if you, again, like this is, you sort of learn I think teams are a good sort of practice for or team sports are a good practice for something that's innately a part of our human dynamic. I think at a deep level, humans want to both be a part of a group and also stand out from the group in their own unique way. Right. And so, and also contribute to the group in their own unique way. So it's like, be a part of the group and also stand out and contribute in your own unique way. And if you have both of those, like in the portfolio of both of those, like that's like that feels really good. And so team sports are a way to practice how to have that as a skill set.
Yeah. So what I want to do to kind of end today's session around like parenting, entitlement, personal development, and finding your purpose is I want to give some practical research-backed tips on how to help create kids that are grounded, that are resilient and self-aware. One of the first things I want to say is, stop doing things for them that they can obviously do themselves. Right. If they can email a teacher, let them be the ones that email the teacher. Um, the second thing I think that's really tough, especially in a world where you can get things delivered on the same day, is delay gratification on purpose. So teaching them to wait, um, and controlling and building that self-control is really big. The third one, which I think is the hardest for most families, is say no and stick to it.
Mm,
Um, you know, if kids are always hearing the word yes, they're going to struggle with boundaries later on in life.
mm,
So I think that's really big. I think making gratitude as well as a daily habit is important, especially when you have so much privilege. And I will say exposing them to real world experiences, number five, because I still volunteer as an adult. I volunteered when I was younger. I think that visiting places with different socioeconomic
mm,
realities is important. I still remember my first time going to India. I think people need to see things outside of their bubble
mm.
and on a regular basis. And then I think the big thing is being honest with your kids, like model humility and hard work. Like
Yeah.
let them know you've struggled as a person. Let them know you've made mistakes. You're not this perfect person that, hey, these are some things I've done and they're really tough. And then the last one I'm going to say is let them fail and don't fix it. This is I think, the hardest lesson for anybody.
100%.
I think it's hard for even us. I have a hard time letting my friends fall apart, right? So I can't imagine, right? Like for people that have kids, you're like, oh, I don't want to. Let me fix your bad grade for you. I'll email the teacher. Let me see what that person graded it wrong. Or, oh, you forgot your homework. Let me talk to the teacher about it. Or, oh, you forgot, your water bottle for the hundredth time. No, I'll drop it off. You can't survive without water for a day, right? So what happens is if they always know that you're going to do that, it makes it very hard for them to understand consequences in life. And I think in the end, failure builds resilience. Peter, I know we're both entrepreneurs. I know we've both failed miserably. That year that my business was run by a full team of executives was the time that we lost the most money in the business. They
Sure.
didn't
Of
manage it
course.
right. And I
Sure.
always tell my accounting team, I was like Michael Jordan for so long. And then that year, it's like I went to go play baseball because I was so lost. And then I had to like lick my wounds and come back to my business with it like in six figures of loss and all this of what went wrong. And, rebuild this whole thing that I thought was perfect. And I will tell you that failure, whew, ooh, there's not, oh God, I get hot just thinking about it. That is the one time in my life I was humbled so hard. Like, I remember going to lunch with my mom and sobbing and being like, I don't have money in my account. I'm like starting to really, my accounting team has told me if I do not let go of my team, it's going to be really bad. And my mom's like, what's going on? And she at that time was like, what can I do to help? I was like, Mom, I can't take anything from you. Like, you're by yourself. Just please don't. But it was one of those situations. I'm literally sweating from talking about this. This is so,
Yeah.
but the truth of the matter is, this is what makes me such an amazing entrepreneur today. Like
Sure.
the way I manage things, the way things are done in my business, how I'm
Sure.
handling it, it's better than it's ever been in the past.
Sure. Of course.
But like I get hot talking about it because it's such a vulnerable thing to share, right? Like
Oh my
I've never
God.
shared before like that I've lost money in my business and I had to fire a whole team and how painful that
Uh,
was. But it's what
uh,
I structured my business. I said we're only working with 100 students. This is how we're doing things, and this is
yeah.
it. And we're going to attract the right families, and it's just going to be what
Yep.
it is. And I'm more involved in it, and I love it. It's back
Yep.
to the business that works for me.
Yep.
But that failure point, I've had that failure point in my business 2 or 3 times. Oh my God, it's so hard, but it's what makes me like so gritty.
Yes.
It also,
100%.
I had a brother-in-law at my wedding say, Neha's the kind of girl that even if everything hits the fan, girl can go live in a one-bedroom apartment, sell her nice car, she'll be just fine. That to me, that statement, that is the most powerful thing I
Mm,
think someone could say. That if you can adapt and say, you know what, I'll let go of
mm,
all this because I know I've got me.
yeah.
And I think a lot of people can't say that. And that's the part that's really tough, especially when you get used to a certain lifestyle.
100%.
Any last words, Peter, on failure and, just the power of it?
That is the cost to happiness, right? That is the cost to, a high quality of life. It is not a straight line, and it's nonlinear, and it's full of these very sticky, tough situations that are emotionally and psychologically taxing. Your alternative, of course, is Zuck, Sinaloa cartel, big pharma, you know, psychiatric, pharmaceutical, industrial complex. Pick any other, pick any other distraction. But like that's the society we live in. And, I think in a way, I think nature is very beautiful in that way where, oh, focus on finding your own sense of self. That's an energy, right? So I think all this, and one of the things I didn't talk about is like all this is a sort of like energy stuff, right? I'm a huge believer in, however you're vibrating and however intense and strong it is, you'll attract and repel. You'll attract
Yes.
and repel the things in your life. And if you don't learn how to do that, then it's almost like the, Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. It's almost like this, riddle, or sort of message that is like nonsensical, but very sensical, very wise. And so, I think if you're very intentional about your energy, which is in itself, the cost of that is sometimes this type of good pain that builds sort of a stronger vibration as the future happens. Like all that kind of stuff is very hard to transfer to kids these days. It's even harder in fluid environments. It's even harder in modern American society where people are talking about, well, artificial intelligence is going to take over all brains. Oh my God.
Mhm.
Right. So, the future is just going to continue to be this sort of vast world of just always on distraction. And the people who are going to benefit the most are the ones who can focus, the ones who are very intentional about their energy, the ones who are trying to get all the right players on their team and play the game with a high level of joy and skill. And, there's a cost to all that. It's like that won't be
There is.
easy, right?
Not at all. Yeah,
But
agreed. I totally agree with you on that. I mean, I think that like I read a post recently that said like boring is good, and it's very true. Like when you talk about energy, right? Like I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do drugs. Like I do not allow any outside substance to
yeah,
shift or change my energy that doesn't make me the peak performer that I need to be energetically on a daily basis.
yeah,
Like even feeling unwell, which unfortunately I'm a little under the weather, like it's very hard for me to not be at that energetic cleanse level at all times because I have to represent not just myself, but my team, my business, my family, right? Like there's a lot of aspects to it. And so I totally agree with you. And I hope for everyone listening that, you enjoyed our conversation. Again, I met Peter energetically randomly, right? CEO Chicago's Clubhouse, where, I was speaking to a group and I was trying to like really explain the importance of passion and starting early. And some people were getting it, some people weren't. But Peter was the one that was sitting outside the room that totally got it and was like, wow, this is the vibration. And this is the vibration I'm big on because I believe like there's going to be families that get my value, get what I'm trying to share and why it absolutely matters when we're raising our kids because the education system, in my opinion, is still broken. It is not solving this problem yet, which is why I built
Sure.
that solution. And from my perspective, I'm going to keep doing it until that problem is fully solved at a mass scale level. Like I think it's so important. So I hope everyone enjoyed this conversation about, how to build resilient kids. Really kind of diving deep and vulnerable around failure and entitlement and these conversations that I think aren't really happening publicly. I think it's important for us to talk about these types of things because, especially in rooms of privilege and affluence, it's hush hush, right?
Sure. Agree.
This is not discussed. Um, and so when I met you, I said, can we please do this? Because I wanted people to hear from, and for a lot of people that are listening, maybe it's people that look like them that they've never been able to hear this type of conversation. So for anyone listening, we hope you really enjoyed our casual but interesting information and conversation around these topics. Please subscribe if you are interested in hearing more. And thank you, Peter, for joining. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Neha.
Thanks.